Michael waited until the exact moment his wife was standing beside her father's coffin, 7 months pregnant, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by mourners in black. That was when he pulled her behind a tree and shoved divorce papers into her trembling hands. He told her she was boring. He told her the baby might not even be his. He told her she had nothing, no money, no job, no family. And then he walked away. He got in his car and drove off without looking back. Not once. He left her collapsed on the ground at her own father's grave, clutching her pregnant belly, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Michael thought he had won. He thought Sarah was finished. He thought she would spend the rest of her life broken and begging. But what Michael did not know, what he could not have imagined in his worst nightmare, was that the quiet old man in that coffin, the man he always dismissed as average and unimportant, had been hiding a secret worth $800 million, and every single penny of it now belonged to Sarah. This is a story about betrayal, about greed, about a man who threw away the greatest blessing of his life, and a woman who rose from the ashes to become untouchable. Stay with us until the end. You do not want to miss what happens when Michael finally discovers the truth. This story carries a message we believe everyone needs to hear. Your worth is never determined by someone who chooses to leave. The people who walk away from you are not taking your value with them. They are walking away from their own blessing. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not fight back, not seek revenge, but simply become so strong, so successful, and so at peace that the person who tried to destroy you becomes completely irrelevant to your story. If this message speaks to you, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you are watching from, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe so you never miss a story that could change the way you see your own life. Michael thought his wife would beg. He stood at the edge of the cemetery, watching Sarah from a distance, and he felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no love. He watched her standing beside her father's coffin, with her swollen, pregnant belly pressing against that loose black dress. And all he could think about was how tired he was of her, how tired he was of her crying, how tired he was of her needing him, how tired he was of pretending. Today was the day. He had made his decision weeks ago, but he had been waiting for the right moment. Some people might say that a funeral was the worst possible time to hand your husband your pregnant wife divorce papers. But Michael saw it differently. Sarah was already broken. Her father was dead. She was emotional and weak and vulnerable. She would sign the papers without a fight. She would let him go because she had no strength left to hold on. That was what Michael wanted. A clean break, a quick divorce. No drama, no lawyers, no long court battles. Just sign here, Sarah, and we are done. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from today. Maybe you are in Texas, Toronto, London, or Nairobi. We would love to know. Now, let us get back to the story. The cemetery was quiet except for the soft sound of people crying. It was a gray morning, and the sky looked like it might rain at any moment. About 50 people stood around the grave, all dressed in black, all looking sad. James Parker had been a well-liked man, not flashy, not loud, but kind and generous in a quiet way that people remembered. Sarah stood near the front, closest to the coffin. Her hand rested on her belly, and every few seconds she would feel the baby kick gently, as if the little one inside her was trying to say, "I am here, Mama. I am here. Do not be afraid." But Sarah was afraid. She was terrified. Her father had been her rock, her anchor, the one person in the world who always told her the truth. When she was a little girl and had nightmares, he would sit on the edge of her bed and hold her hand until she fell asleep. When she was a teenager and boys broke her heart, he would make her hot chocolate and tell her she was worth more than any boy could ever understand. When she married Michael and moved away, her father called her every single day just to hear her voice. Now he was gone, and Sarah felt like someone had cut the rope that held her to the earth, and she was floating away into nothing. "Are you okay?" her cousin Lisa whispered, touching Sarah's arm gently. Sarah nodded, but she was not okay. She had not been okay since the hospital called 3 days ago and told her that her father had passed away peacefully in his sleep. Peacefully. As if there was anything peaceful about losing the person you loved most in the world. Sarah looked to her left, searching for Michael. He was supposed to be standing beside her. That was what husbands did at funerals. They stood beside their wives and held their hands and whispered, "I am here. Everything will be okay." But Michael was not beside her. He stood about 3 feet away, his arms crossed over his chest, staring at his phone. His face wore an expression of pure annoyance, like he was stuck in traffic or waiting in a long line at the grocery store. Like being at his father-in-law's funeral was an inconvenience. "Michael," Sarah whispered, "can you hold my hand, please?" Michael looked up from his phone. Their eyes met, and Sarah searched his face for something. Anything. Kindness, love, even basic human sympathy. But his eyes were cold and flat, like 2 stones at the bottom of a frozen river. "I need to take this call," he said, and he turned and walked away, pressing his phone to his ear, heading toward the parking lot. Sarah watched him go. She watched him walk past her father's coffin without even glancing at it. She watched him pull out his car keys and lean against his car, laughing into the phone about something. Laughing at her father's funeral. The pastor began to speak. "We are here today to say goodbye to James Parker, a good man, a loving father, a quiet hero who touched more lives than he ever knew." Sarah tried to listen. She tried to be present for this final moment with her father, but the tears fell so fast and so hard that she could barely see. Her hands trembled as she held her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her, as if the child could sense her mother's pain. "I am so sorry, Daddy," Sarah whispered so quietly that no one could hear. "I am so sorry you had to go." The funeral continued. One by one, people walked to the front and said kind things about James Parker. They talked about his generosity, his quiet wisdom, his love for his daughter. An old friend from college told a story about how James had once driven 4 hours in a snowstorm to help him fix a broken furnace. A neighbor described how James would mow her lawn every week after her husband passed away, never asking for anything in return. Sarah cried through all of it, and Michael never came back. After the pastor finished, people lined up to offer Sarah their condolences. They hugged her carefully, mindful of her pregnant belly. They said things like, "Your father was a wonderful man, and stay strong, dear, and he is in a better place now." Sarah tried to smile and say thank you, but each hug reminded her that her father would never hug her again. Each kind word reminded her of all the kind words her father would never say. Then she saw Michael walking back from the parking lot. Finally, she thought, finally he is coming to be with me. But Michael did not come to comfort her. He walked straight up to her, with that same cold expression on his face, and said, "Sarah, we need to talk. Right now." Sarah blinked. "Now?" she asked. "Michael, the funeral is not even over. They have not lowered the coffin yet. Can it wait?" "No," Michael said. "It cannot wait. Come with me." Something in his voice made Sarah's blood run cold. It was not anger exactly. It was something worse. It was finality, like a door slamming shut. She followed him, walking slowly, because her belly was heavy and her feet ached in her flat black shoes. Michael led her behind a large oak tree, away from the other mourners, where no one could see them clearly. Sarah's heart pounded. "What is going on?" she asked. "Michael, you are scaring me." Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a brown envelope. He did not look at her face. He just stared at the envelope like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "I want a divorce," he said. Sarah heard the words, but her brain refused to process them. It was like someone had spoken to her in a foreign language. The sounds reached her ears, but they did not make sense. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me," Michael said, still not looking at her. "I want a divorce. I am done with this marriage." Sarah felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. She reached out and grabbed the trunk of the oak tree to steady herself. Her other hand went instinctively to her belly, as if she could shield her baby from what was happening. "But why?" her voice cracked. "Michael, what are you talking about? We are having a baby. We are supposed to be a family." "That is the thing," Michael said, and now he finally looked up at her. His eyes were like ice. Two cold, dead things set in a face she used to love. "I am not even sure that baby is mine." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She gasped and stumbled backward. "How can you say that?" she cried. "You know I have never been with anyone else. You know this baby is yours. Michael, how can you even think something so horrible?" "I think a lot of things, Sarah," Michael said. "I think this marriage was a mistake. I think I have been unhappy for a long time, and I think I deserve better." "Better," Sarah repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Better than what? Better than me. Better than your own child." Michael shoved the brown envelope into her trembling hands. "The divorce papers are in here," he said. "I already signed my part. You just need to sign yours, and we are done." Sarah looked down at the envelope. Her hands were shaking so badly that the paper rattled. Behind her, she could hear the pastor saying a final prayer over her father's coffin. She could hear people crying softly. She could hear the wind moving through the cemetery trees. And here was her husband, the man who had promised to love her until death did them part, handing her divorce papers while her father's body was being lowered into the ground. "Michael, please," Sarah begged. She reached for his arm, but he pulled away from her like her touch burned him. "Please do not do this. Not today. Not here. I just lost my father. I cannot lose you too. I cannot do this alone. Please, you should have thought about that before," Michael said coldly. "Before what?" Sarah shouted, no longer caring who heard her. "What did I do?" "Tell me, Michael, what did I do wrong?" "You are boring, Sarah." Michael's voice dripped with disgust. "You are always tired. You are always emotional. You cry all the time. You do not take care of yourself anymore. Look at you. You have gained so much weight." "I am pregnant," Sarah screamed through her tears. "I am pregnant with your baby. Of course I have gained weight. Of course I am tired. How can you be so cruel?" "I am not being cruel," Michael said, straightening his tie like they were discussing the weather. "I am being honest. I do not love you anymore, Sarah. I have not loved you for a long time, and I am tired of pretending." Sarah wrapped both arms around her belly. She could feel the baby kicking hard now, agitated by the stress hormones flooding through her body. She wanted to collapse. She wanted to scream until her throat was raw. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare. "Sign the papers," Michael said. "Make this easy for both of us." "I will not," Sarah said. Her voice trembled, but there was a thread of steel underneath the pain. "I will not sign them. You cannot just throw me away like I am nothing." "Fine," Michael shrugged. "Then I will see you in court. But trust me, Sarah, you do not want to fight me. You have nothing. No job, no money, no family, now that your father is gone. You have absolutely nothing, and you cannot win." Each word was a knife. And the worst part was that he was right. Sarah had quit her job 6 months ago because Michael told her to stay home and rest during her pregnancy. He said he would take care of everything. He said she did not need to work. And she had believed him because she trusted him, because she loved him. "How can you do this to me?" Sarah sobbed. "How can you be so heartless?" Michael did not answer. He just looked at his watch, like he had somewhere more important to be. Then he said, "I have to go. Sign the papers, Sarah. It is over." And he walked away. He walked through the cemetery without looking back. He walked past the mourners and the flowers and the freshly dug grave. He got into his car, started the engine, and drove away. Sarah watched his car disappear down the road. Then her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the grass, her black dress getting stained with dirt and mud. She hugged her belly and cried harder than she had ever cried in her life. People rushed over. Lisa was the first to reach her. "Sarah, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? Is it the baby?" But Sarah could not speak. All she could do was cry and hold her stomach and rock back and forth on the ground while the world fell apart around her. Someone called an ambulance because they were afraid she was going into early labor. The paramedics came and checked her vitals and the baby's heartbeat. Everything was fine, physically. The baby was healthy. Sarah's body was intact, but her heart was destroyed. They helped her into Lisa's car. Lisa drove her to her father's house because Sarah had nowhere else to go. The house Michael and Sarah had shared was in Michael's name. He had made that very clear. Lisa helped Sarah inside and onto the couch. She made her tea that Sarah did not drink. She covered her with a blanket that Sarah did not feel. She said comforting words that Sarah did not hear. Sarah just lay there, staring at the ceiling of her dead father's house, holding the brown envelope full of divorce papers, wondering how a single day could contain so much loss. Her father was dead. Her husband was gone. She was 7 months pregnant with no money, no job, and no one to turn to. In the span of 12 hours, Sarah Parker had lost everything, or so she thought. For the next several days, Sarah existed in a fog. She did not eat unless Lisa forced her to. She did not sleep unless her body simply shut down from exhaustion. She did not answer her phone, which rang constantly with calls from Michael's lawyer demanding she sign the divorce papers. She sat in her father's old armchair, the one that still smelled like him, and stared at the wall. The house was painfully quiet, no footsteps, no humming from the kitchen, no voice calling out, "Sarah, honey, come see this." Just silence. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table, untouched. Sarah looked at them every time she walked past, but she could not bring herself to pick up a pen. Signing those papers would make everything final. It would mean that her marriage, her family, her future as she had imagined it, was truly and completely over. Lisa came by every afternoon with food. "You need to eat," Lisa would say gently. "The baby needs you to be strong." Sarah would take a few bites to make Lisa stop worrying, then push the plate away. Everything tasted like nothing. At night, Sarah would lie in her father's bed and talk to her baby. "I am sorry," she would whisper in the darkness, her hands cradling her belly. "I am so sorry your daddy does not want us. But I promise you, little one, I will love you enough for both of us. I will never leave you, never." The baby would kick in response, and Sarah would cry until she fell asleep. Then, on a Tuesday morning, her phone rang. Sarah almost did not answer. She was tired of Michael's lawyer calling, but when she looked at the screen, it was a number she did not recognize. Something made her pick up. "Hello?" Sarah said, her voice rough from days of crying. "Is this Sarah Parker?" a man asked. His voice was calm and professional. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Richard Thompson. I am a lawyer. I was your father's attorney. I am very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Parker. Sarah felt fresh tears forming. Thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Parker, I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. There are some very important matters regarding your father's estate that we need to discuss. Sarah frowned. Estate. My father did not have an estate. He just had this house and maybe a small savings account. There was a pause on the other end. Then Mr. Thompson said, very gently, Mrs. Parker, please trust me. You need to come to my office today. This is extremely important. Something in his voice, a quiet urgency that was impossible to ignore, made Sarah pay attention. She wrote down the address. It was in the business district downtown, in one of those tall glass buildings where only the most expensive lawyers had their offices. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Why would her father, a man who drove a 10-year-old car and lived in a modest 3-bedroom house, have a lawyer in the most expensive part of the city? She forced herself to shower, to put on a clean blue dress that fit over her belly, to brush her hair. She did not bother with makeup. What was the point? The drive took 30 minutes. Sarah parked in the underground garage and took the elevator to the 15th floor. The law office was beautiful. Marble floors, leather furniture, oil paintings on the walls. A young receptionist smiled at her warmly. You must be Mrs. Parker. Mr. Thompson is expecting you. Please follow me. Sarah followed her down a long hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. The receptionist opened a heavy wooden door. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Parker is here. Thank you, Jessica. Sarah walked into a massive corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a man in his 60s with silver hair and kind, intelligent eyes. He stood immediately when he saw her and walked around the desk to shake her hand. Ms. Parker, thank you so much for coming. Please sit down. Make yourself comfortable. Sarah lowered herself into a leather chair. Mr. Thompson sat across from her, not behind his desk, but in a matching chair, like they were two friends having a conversation. Can I get you anything? He asked. Water. Tea. No, thank you. Sarah's mouth was dry, but she was too nervous to drink anything. Mr. Thompson, what is this about? Is there a problem with my father's house? Do I owe money? Mr. Thompson smiled gently. No, Mrs. Parker, nothing like that. In fact, quite the opposite. He paused, studying her face carefully. Then he said, Mrs. Parker, did your father ever talk to you about his work? Yes, Sarah said. He worked with computers. He was some kind of programmer. He mostly worked from home. Did he ever mention a company called Technova Solutions? Sarah thought for a moment. No, I do not think so. Why? Mr. Thompson leaned forward. Mrs. Parker, your father was not just a computer programmer. He was one of the co-founders of Technova Solutions. It is one of the largest technology companies in the world. Sarah stared at him. The words entered her ears, but refused to arrange themselves into anything that made sense. I am sorry, she said. What did you just say? Your father, James Parker, started Technova Solutions 25 years ago with his college roommate. They built it from nothing. They created software that transformed how businesses operate across the globe. The company is now worth over $12 billion. Sarah shook her head. No, that cannot be right. My father lived in a small house. He drove an old car. He wore the same jacket for years. He was just a regular person. That is because he was the most humble man I have ever known, Mr. Thompson said. He did not care about showing off his wealth. He cared about you. He wanted you to grow up normal. He wanted you to know the value of hard work and kindness, not the value of a dollar. But why did he not tell me? Sarah asked, and the hurt in her voice was unmistakable. Why would he keep something like this a secret from his own daughter? Mr. Thompson sighed deeply. He had his reasons, Mrs. Parker. Good reasons. About 3 years ago, your father sold his entire stake in the company. He was getting older. He wanted to retire. He wanted to spend more time with you and prepare for the arrival of his grandchild. Sarah's hand went to her belly. Her father had been so excited about the baby. He had already bought a little stuffed bear and a set of tiny socks. When he sold his stake, Mr. Thompson continued, he received a very large sum of money. How much? Sarah whispered. Mr. Thompson opened a leather folder and slid a document across the table. Sarah looked down at it. At the bottom of the page was a number. She read it once, then twice, then 3 times. $800 million. The room tilted. Sarah gripped the arms of the chair. That cannot be real, she said. It is very real, Mr. Thompson said. And according to your father's will, every single penny belongs to you. You are his only child, his only heir. Sarah could not breathe. She literally could not draw air into her lungs. She put her hand on her chest and tried to take a deep breath, but her body would not cooperate. Mrs. Parker, are you all right? Mr. Thompson asked, rising from his chair. Should I call a doctor? I am okay, Sarah managed. I just cannot believe this. Why did he keep this from me? Mr. Thompson's expression grew serious. Mrs. Parker, your father did not trust your husband. What? Sarah looked up sharply. Your father was extremely perceptive, Mr. Thompson continued. He watched how Michael treated you. He noticed how Michael was always asking about finances, always probing about your father's assets. Your father told me, and these were his exact words, Michael does not love my daughter. He loves what he thinks he can get from her. Sarah felt like the room had been drained of air. My father said that. Yes. He was deeply worried about you, especially after you became pregnant. He wanted to tell you about the money, but he was afraid that if Michael found out, he would manipulate the situation. He was afraid Michael would try to take the money and leave you with nothing. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. He was trying to protect me. Yes, Mr. Thompson said softly. He made me promise not to tell you until after he was gone. He said that once he passed, you would need the money to take care of yourself and the baby. He wanted to make sure you and his grandchild would never have to worry about anything ever again. Sarah broke down. She sobbed with her whole body. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place so deep inside her she did not even know it existed. Her father had known. He had seen through Michael when Sarah could not. And he had spent the last years of his life building a safety net so strong that nothing could break through it. Oh, Daddy, Sarah whispered through her tears. I am so sorry I did not listen to you. I am so sorry I did not see what you saw. Sarah left Mr. Thompson's office that afternoon feeling like a completely different person. The sadness was still there. The grief was still heavy in her chest. But underneath all that pain, something new was growing. Something that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Hope. She drove back to her father's house and sat at the kitchen table. The divorce papers were still there, still unsigned. Sarah looked at them for a long time. Then she picked up a notebook and a pen and began to write. At the top of the page, she wrote, Rules for moving forward. Rule number 1, do not fight Michael publicly. Sarah thought about this carefully. She could expose him. She could tell everyone about the divorce at the funeral. She could make him look like the terrible person he was. But what would that accomplish? It would create drama and stress was dangerous for the baby. No, Sarah would take the high road. She would be quiet and strategic. Rule number 2, do not tell anyone about the money. This was the most critical rule. Mr. Thompson had warned her about this. If Michael discovered the inheritance before the divorce was finalized, he would make her life a living nightmare. He would drag her through court for years trying to claim a portion of the fortune. The money was her protection. It was her baby's future. It had to remain secret. Rule number 3, protect the baby above everything else. Everything Sarah did from this moment forward had to serve one purpose: keeping her child safe, healthy, and loved. Rule number 4, start completely over. Sarah could not stay in her father's old house. Every room was filled with memories that made her cry. She needed a fresh beginning, a new place where she could build a new life from the ground up. She looked at her list and felt something she had not felt in a very long time: control. She was taking control of her own story. She picked up her phone and called Mr. Thompson. "I have made my decision," Sarah said. "I am going to sign the divorce papers." There was a brief silence. "Are you sure?" Mr. Thompson asked. "Yes. Michael wants a divorce." "Fine. He can have it, but I have conditions. I am listening. I want full custody of the baby. No joint custody, no visitation rights, unless he proves in court that he is a fit father. And I want it in writing that he is giving up all parental rights voluntarily." "That is very smart," Mr. Thompson said, and Sarah could hear the respect in his voice. If he signs that document, he cannot come back later and try to take the child. "Exactly," Sarah said. "And one more thing. I want to move. Mr. Thompson, my father apparently owned properties. Is there somewhere I can go? Your father owned a beautiful estate about an hour outside the city, 10 acres of land, very private, very secure. I can arrange for you to see it tomorrow." "Please do that," Sarah said. The next morning, Mr. Thompson drove Sarah to the estate. As they approached the property and turned through the iron gates, Sarah gasped. The house was enormous, 3 stories of beautiful stone with tall windows that caught the morning light. A wraparound porch with white columns, rolling green lawns stretching in every direction, ancient oak trees standing like sentinels along the driveway, a flower garden bursting with color, even a small pond with a wooden bench beside it. "My father owned this," Sarah whispered. "He bought it 5 years ago," Mr. Thompson said. "He told me he planned to retire here. He wanted it to be a place where you and your family could visit, where his grandchildren could run and play safely." Sarah pressed her hand against the car window, staring at the house through blurred eyes. Her father had been planning for this, planning for her, planning for the baby, and he never got to see any of it come true. "I want to live here," Sarah said quietly. "This is where I will raise my child." "Then it is yours," Mr. Thompson smiled. Over the following 2 weeks, Sarah transformed the estate into a home. She hired a cleaning crew to scrub every surface until it gleamed. She hired movers to transport her belongings from her father's old house. She worked with an interior designer to create a nursery that was warm and beautiful, painted in soft blue, with white clouds on the ceiling, a hand-carved wooden crib, shelves lined with books and stuffed animals. She also hired a professional security company. They installed cameras around the entire property and stationed 2 guards at the gate around the clock. "No one enters this property without your explicit permission," the head of security told her. "You and your baby will be completely safe here." Sarah also took Mr. Thompson's advice and began seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Williams, and she was kind and direct in equal measure. "You have been through tremendous trauma," Dr. Williams told Sarah during their first session. "Losing your father, being abandoned by your husband during pregnancy. These are serious emotional wounds, and they need proper care. Asking for help is not weakness, Sarah. It is one of the bravest things a person can do." Through therapy, Sarah began to process the hurricane of emotions that had been tearing through her for weeks. She learned that it was okay to be angry at Michael, She learned that grief was not a straight line, but a winding road with good days and terrible days. She learned that she did not have to be perfect. She just had to keep going. Slowly, day by day, Sarah began to heal. She took long walks around the estate every morning. She ate nutritious meals. She slept better. She talked to her baby constantly. "We are going to be okay," she would say, rubbing her belly as she walked past the pond. "We are going to have a wonderful life here. I promise you that." And for the first time since her world collapsed, Sarah believed it. While Sarah was quietly rebuilding her life, Michael was discovering that the grass on the other side was not greener at all. In fact, it was mostly dead. It started with money. Michael sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the bill in his hands. $10,000 for 1 month. His face was the color of old brick. "This cannot be right," he muttered. Rachel Bennett looked over his shoulder, twirling a strand of her long, shiny hair. "Well, there is the room charge, plus room service every day, plus the minibar, plus my spa treatments, plus that dinner at the steakhouse last week. Okay, Michael snapped. "I get it. We need to cut back." But Rachel did not want to cut back. Rachel wanted to upgrade. "Michael, I am tired of living in a hotel," she said, crossing her arms. "I want a real apartment. Something in the city with a doorman, and a gym, and a rooftop pool. You promised me the good life, remember?" "Rachel, those apartments cost a fortune," Michael said. "So?" Rachel shot back. "You told me you were successful. You told me you would take care of everything. Was that all a lie?" "Of course not," Michael said quickly, but he could feel sweat forming on the back of his neck. The truth was that Michael's business was collapsing. His consulting company, which had once been modestly profitable, was hemorrhaging clients. And the reason was simple. Michael had completely stopped paying attention to his work. He missed meetings. He did not return calls. He forgot deadlines. He was so consumed with Rachel and his new exciting life that he had neglected the only thing that actually made him money. One by one, his clients canceled their contracts. Without clients, there was no revenue. Without revenue, there was no way to pay for the hotel, the restaurants, the jewelry, the designer bags he kept buying Rachel to keep her happy. And the house he had shared with Sarah, the one he planned to sell for a nice profit, was sitting on the market with 0 offers. The real estate agent said the market was slow. Michael said the real estate agent was incompetent. "I need you to be patient," Michael told Rachel. "Just a few more weeks, and everything will work out." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "You have been saying that for a month." Their fights became more frequent, almost nightly, actually. Rachel would complain about the hotel, Michael would snap about money, Rachel would threaten to leave, Michael would promise things he could not deliver. It was an ugly cycle that spun faster and faster with each passing day. One evening, in the middle of yet another argument, Michael's phone rang. It was his lawyer, Mr. Davidson. "Michael, we need to talk," Mr. Davidson said. Sarah signed the divorce papers. Michael felt a rush of relief. Finally, that was the first good news he had heard in weeks. "But she added conditions," Mr. Davidson continued. "What conditions?" Michael asked, his relief evaporating instantly. "She wants full custody of the baby, and she wants you to sign away all parental rights." "She cannot do that," Michael shouted. "Actually, she can," Mr. Davidson said calmly. "And honestly, Michael, I do not think you should fight her on this. If you fight for custody, she might request child support. And given your current financial situation, that could hurt you badly." Michael opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his tongue. His lawyer was right. He was broke. He could not afford a custody battle. And if he was being honest with himself, truly honest, he did not want the baby. He had never wanted the baby. He had only threatened to fight for custody to make Sarah feel afraid. "Fine," Michael said bitterly. "I will sign the papers." "Good," Mr. Davidson said. I will have them sent over today." Michael hung up and stared at the wall. Rachel was watching him from across the room. "You are giving up the baby," she said. "I do not have a choice," Michael replied. "What about child support?" Rachel pressed. "You could get money from Sarah every month." "Sarah does not have any money," Michael said tiredly. "Her father was just a regular guy. He probably left her nothing. There is no point fighting for child support when there is nothing to support with." Rachel made a sound of pure disgust. "So you left your pregnant wife for nothing? No house, no baby, no money. What exactly was the point, Michael?" "The point was you," Michael shouted. "I left her for you, because you told me we would be happy." "Well, I am not happy," Rachel shouted back. "I am living in a hotel we cannot afford with a man who is going broke, and honestly, Michael, I am starting to think I made a huge mistake." The words hung in the air between them, like smoke from a fire. 2 weeks later, Michael signed the custody papers. The divorce was finalized. He told himself he was relieved. He told himself he was free. But late at night, when Rachel was asleep and the hotel room was dark and quiet, Michael would lie awake and think about Sarah. He wondered where she was. He wondered how the baby was. He wondered, for the first time, if he had made a terrible mistake. He tried calling her. Once, twice, 5 times in a week. Every call went straight to voicemail. "Sarah," he said in one message, his voice cracking slightly, "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I still care about you and the baby. Please just let me know you are okay." She never called back. Not once. It was a Thursday afternoon, 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Michael sat alone in the hotel room, scrolling through business news on his phone. Rachel was out spending the last available balance on his credit card. He was scanning headlines absent-mindedly, barely reading them, when 5 words made his heart stop. Late business mogul James Parker. Michael's thumb froze over the screen. James Parker. That was Sarah's father. But there had to be hundreds of James Parkers. This could not be the same person. He tapped the headline. The article opened, and Michael began to read. The technology world was shocked this week to learn about the passing of James Parker, co-founder of Technova Solutions, one of the most successful technology companies in the world. But even more shocking was the revelation that Parker, who lived a quiet and private life, left behind a fortune estimated at over $800 million to a single heir. Michael's heart began to pound. He kept reading. Parker sold his stake in Technova Solutions 3 years ago. For an undisclosed sum, though sources close to the deal estimate the figure at approximately $800 million. Parker then retreated from public life, living modestly in a small house and rarely appearing at social events. Small house. Modest life. Michael's hands started to shake. According to Parker's attorney, Mr. Richard Thompson, of Thompson and Associates, the entirety of Parker's fortune has been left to his only daughter. Michael could not breathe. The identity of the heir has been confirmed as Sarah Parker, age 29. And then he saw the photograph. It was Sarah. But not the Sarah he remembered. Not the crying, broken woman he had left at the cemetery. This Sarah was radiant. She stood in front of a stunning estate wearing an elegant maternity dress that showed her pregnant belly proudly. Her hair was styled beautifully. Her skin glowed. She wore a small, peaceful smile that spoke of someone completely at ease with her place in the world. The caption read, Sarah Parker, heir to the $800 million Parker fortune, photographed at her late father's private estate. Michael dropped the phone. It bounced off his knee and landed face up on the carpet. Sarah's glowing photograph staring back at him. "No," Michael whispered. "No, no, no. This cannot be real. This cannot be happening. $800 million. His ex-wife, the woman he had called boring, the woman he had thrown away like yesterday's newspaper, was worth $800 million. He had divorced one of the richest women in the country. He had given up his parental rights to the child of one of the richest women in the country. He had done this voluntarily. Enthusiastically, he had walked away laughing. Michael stood up so fast that he knocked over the bedside lamp. It crashed to the floor and shattered, but he did not notice. His entire body was shaking, his vision blurred. He thought he might vomit. At that exact moment, the hotel room door opened, and Rachel walked in carrying 4 shopping bags. "Michael, you will not believe the sale they were having at." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw his face. "What is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost." Michael could not speak. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. Rachel dropped the bags and walked over. She picked up his phone from the floor. She read the headline. She scrolled down. She saw Sarah's photograph. And then Rachel screamed. It was a scream that probably could be heard 3 floors in every direction. $800 million, Rachel shrieked. Sarah has $800 million. What followed was the worst fight of their relationship. They screamed at each other for over an hour. Rachel called Michael the biggest idiot in the world. Michael blamed Rachel for pushing him to get the divorce. Rachel said if she had known about the money, she would have told him to stay married and just have an affair on the side. Michael said that was disgusting. Rachel said he had no right to act moral after what he did at the funeral. Back and forth they went, hurling accusations and blame like weapons, and underneath all the shouting was the same terrible realization. They had lost. They had gambled on cruelty and selfishness, and they had lost everything. Finally, Michael grabbed his car keys. "Where are you going?" Rachel demanded. "To see Sarah," Michael said. "I need to fix this." He drove like a madman, running yellow lights, ignoring speed limits until he found the estate. The iron gates were closed. A security guard stepped out of a booth. "I am here to see Sarah Parker," Michael said, trying to control his breathing. "I am her husband. I mean, her ex-husband." The guard checked his clipboard. "I am sorry, sir. You are not on the approved visitor list." Michael begged. He pleaded. He raised his voice. A second guard appeared, larger and less sympathetic than the first. "Sarah," Michael yelled toward the mansion. "Sarah, I know you can hear me. Please, I made a mistake. I am sorry. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Please, Sarah. Please." His voice echoed across the grounds and disappeared into silence. No one came to the door. The guards told him to leave, or they would call the police. Michael got back in his car and sat there for 5 minutes, staring at the mansion through the iron gates, hoping for a miracle that did not come. What Michael did not know was that Sarah was watching from an upstairs window. She could see him at the gate. She could faintly hear his voice carried on the wind, and she felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no satisfaction, nothing. She put her hand on her belly, felt her baby kick, and closed the curtain. Then she went downstairs to have lunch. 2 days after being turned away from the estate, Michael sat in his lawyer's office with wild eyes and a desperate plan. "I want to reverse the divorce," Michael said. Mr. Davidson stared at him. "You cannot reverse a divorce because you changed your mind, Michael." "Why not?" "People make mistakes." Mr. Davidson took off his glasses. "Michael, if you go into court and tell a judge that you want to reverse your divorce because you just discovered your ex-wife is wealthy, do you know what will happen?" "What?" "The judge will laugh at you and then dismiss your case." Michael's face reddened, but he pressed on. "What about the baby? I gave up my parental rights. Can I get them back?" "You signed legal documents," Mr. Davidson said slowly. "You stated in writing that you did not want to be the child's father." I changed my mind, Michael said stubbornly. The law does not care that you changed your mind, Mr. Davidson replied. You made your choice. There was a long, painful silence. I cannot help you with this, Mr. Davidson said finally, and I will not help you with this. What you are trying to do is wrong, and any judge in this country will see through it immediately. Michael stormed out. He found another lawyer, a man named Mr. Hayes, who was willing to take his money and file a petition for joint custody of the unborn child. They went to court 3 weeks later. Sarah arrived with Mr. Thompson and 2 additional lawyers from his firm. She wore a beautiful maternity dress and looked calm, composed, and strong. Her belly was very large now. She was 8.5 months pregnant. Michael arrived with Mr. Hayes. He wore his best suit, which had started to look worn at the cuffs, and tried to project confidence. But inside, he was terrified. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Harrison. She had sharp eyes, silver hair pulled back tightly, and an expression that suggested she had heard every possible lie and excuse in her 25 years on the bench. Mr. Hayes, Judge Harrison said, looking at Michael's lawyer over the top of her reading glasses. You are here requesting joint custody of a child that has not yet been born. A child whose father voluntarily relinquished all parental rights just 2 months ago. Please explain. Mr. Hayes stood. Your Honor, my client, Michael Bradford, has had time to reflect on his decision. He realizes that he acted hastily and under emotional duress. He loves his child and wants to be part of the child's life. Judge Harrison turned her gaze to Michael. Mr. Bradford, is this true? Michael stood up. He had practiced this speech dozens of times in front of the hotel bathroom mirror. Yes, Your Honor. I made a terrible mistake. I was going through a very difficult time emotionally, and I was not thinking clearly when I signed those papers, but I have had time to reflect, and I know now that I want to be a father to my child. It was a decent performance. But then Mr. Thompson stood up. Your Honor, if I may. Go ahead, Judge Harrison said. Your Honor, Mr. Bradford is not being truthful with this court. He does not want custody of this child because he wants to be a father. He wants custody because he wants access to my client's financial resources. That is not true, Michael shouted. Judge Harrison's gavel came down hard. Order. Mr. Bradford, you will have your turn. Mr. Thompson, continue. Mr. Thompson approached the bench and handed Judge Harrison a thick folder. Your Honor, we have compiled extensive evidence regarding Mr. Bradford's true motivations. Judge Harrison opened the folder and began reading. With each page she turned, her expression grew darker. First, Mr. Thompson said, we have text messages between Mr. Bradford and his girlfriend, Rachel Bennett, sent just 3 days ago. In these messages, Mr. Bradford explicitly states, and I quote from the exhibit, that he wants custody so he can, quote, get child support from Sarah's millions, end quote. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. Second, we have hotel receipts documenting that Mr. Bradford was living with Mrs. Bennett during the entire duration of his wife's pregnancy, including the day of James Parker's funeral. Third, we have sworn statements from 23 people who attended the funeral. Every single one describes the same scene. Mr. Bradford pulling his pregnant wife aside while her father's coffin was being lowered into the ground and handing her divorce papers. Multiple witnesses describe Mrs. Parker collapsing on the ground in distress. Multiple witnesses confirm that Mr. Bradford walked away without looking back. The courtroom was completely silent. Michael wished he could disappear. And finally, Mr. Thompson said, we have Mr. Bradford's own signed declaration from 2 months ago in which he voluntarily surrendered all parental rights. In that same document, he questioned whether the child was even his, despite having no evidence whatsoever of infidelity on Mrs. Parker's part. Judge Harrison closed the folder. She looked at Michael, and her eyes were colder than anything he had ever seen. Mr. Bradford, she said slowly, Is everything in this folder true? Michael looked desperately at Mr. Hayes, but his lawyer had nothing to offer. No objection, no strategy, no words. I can explain, Michael stammered. Please do, Judge Harrison said. Explain to me why you divorced your pregnant wife at her father's funeral. Explain why you questioned your own child's paternity. Explain why you gave up your parental rights. And explain why, 2 months later, after discovering your ex-wife inherited a fortune, you suddenly want to be a devoted father. Michael opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Judge Harrison nodded, as if his silence confirmed everything. Mr. Bradford, I have been on this bench for 25 years. I have seen many cases, heard many stories, but I have rarely encountered someone whose behavior so clearly demonstrates that a child's well-being is not their concern. Every action you have taken, from the divorce at the funeral to the custody petition, filed 3 days after learning about the inheritance, points to one motivation: greed. Your petition for joint custody is denied. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order. You are to have no contact with Mrs. Parker or her child unless she explicitly requests it. Any violation will result in contempt charges. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Michael whispered. I cannot hear you, Judge Harrison said. Yes, Your Honor, Michael said louder, his voice cracking. Mrs. Parker? Judge Harrison said, turning to Sarah with an entirely different expression, one of warmth and respect. You have full custody from the moment of birth. Mr. Bradford has no rights, no visitation, and no claim to your child. This court wishes you and your baby all the best. Thank you, Your Honor, Sarah said softly. Michael walked out of the courtroom in complete humiliation. People in the hallway stared. They had heard everything through the open doors. They knew exactly what kind of man he was. 6 weeks after the court hearing, on a beautiful spring morning when the trees on the estate were exploding with pink and white blossoms, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The delivery was long and difficult. 14 hours of labor, but Sarah was strong, stronger than she had ever been. And when the doctor finally placed her son in her arms, Sarah looked down at his tiny red face and felt a love so enormous, so overwhelming, so all-consuming that she thought her heart might actually burst. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears of pure joy streaming down her cheeks. "I am your mama. I have been waiting so long to meet you." The baby opened his dark eyes and looked up at her, and in that moment, every single terrible thing that had happened over the past months dissolved like fog in sunlight. The grief, the betrayal, the loneliness, the fear. None of it mattered anymore. Because this tiny perfect human was here and he was hers, and she was his, and that was everything. "What are you going to name him?" the nurse asked with a warm smile. Sarah did not hesitate. She had known the answer for months. "James," she said. "His name is James, after his grandfather." Sarah stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Her room overflowed with flowers. Bouquets from Mr. Thompson, a massive arrangement from her cousin Lisa, colorful bunches from friends she had made in recent months, cards and stuffed animals and tiny baby shoes. There was nothing from Michael, no flowers, no card, no call, and Sarah was glad. When she brought baby James home to the estate, everything was ready. The nursery was perfect. The crib was made of hand-carved wood with soft white sheets. A mobile of stars and moons hung above it, turning slowly in the breeze from the open window. Books lined the shelves. A rocking chair sat by the window, positioned so Sarah could look out at the pond while she fed the baby. That first night, Sarah sat in the rocking chair with James sleeping in her arms. Moonlight poured through the window, painting everything silver and blue. "You will never suffer the way I did," Sarah whispered to her sleeping son. "You will never know hunger, or fear, or abandonment." You will grow up surrounded by love. You will be protected. You will be safe. She kissed the top of his tiny head. Your grandfather wanted this for you, she continued softly. He worked his entire life so that you could have everything you need, and I am going to honor his gift. I am going to use it wisely. I am going to make him proud. The baby sighed in his sleep, his tiny fingers curling around the collar of Sarah's shirt, and Sarah smiled through her tears. Over the following months, Sarah threw herself into building something meaningful. She started the James Parker Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping single mothers and their children. The foundation provided free housing, job training, childcare, and educational programs. Sarah remembered too well how terrified she had been when Michael left, how alone she felt, how hopeless. She did not want any other woman to experience that kind of despair. She wanted every struggling mother to know that someone cared, that help existed, that their situation was not permanent. The foundation grew rapidly. Within its first year, it had helped over 500 families across 3 cities. Sarah visited the centers regularly, sitting with the mothers, listening to their stories, playing with their children. One afternoon, a young woman named Katie approached Sarah at one of the centers. Katie was 23, with a toddler on her hip and dark circles under her eyes. Mrs. Parker, Katie said quietly, I just wanted to thank you. When my boyfriend left me, I had nothing. No money. No family nearby. I thought about giving up. I really did. But then someone told me about your foundation, and now I have an apartment, and I am enrolled in nursing school, and my daughter goes to the daycare here. You saved our lives. Sarah hugged her. You saved your own life, Katie. I just helped open a door. You are the one who walked through it. Sarah also invested wisely, working with expert financial advisors, learning everything she could about technology and business, just as her father had done. Some investments failed, but most succeeded. Her fortune grew steadily. She began speaking publicly about her experience. She gave interviews about single motherhood, about grief, about rebuilding after betrayal. She never mentioned Michael by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The best revenge, Sarah said in one interview that went viral, is not revenge at all. It is becoming the person you were always meant to be. It is refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your story. People loved her. Magazines featured her on their covers. She won awards for her philanthropy. Universities invited her to speak to graduating classes. She became a symbol of resilience and grace under pressure. And through it all, little James grew strong and happy and full of wonder. He took his first steps on his first birthday, wobbling across the estate's enormous living room, while Sarah cheered and clapped and cried happy tears. He was a joyful child, always laughing, always reaching for things, always curious about the world. Sarah made sure James knew about his grandfather. She told him stories every night about how smart Grandpa James was, how kind, how he built something amazing from nothing, how he loved his grandson before he was even born. Your grandfather was a hero, Sarah would tell little James, and you carry his name. That is something to be very proud of. Michael's life went in the opposite direction. After the court hearing, everything collapsed like a building with its foundation removed. First, Rachel left. She packed her bags one morning while Michael was sleeping and disappeared. She left a note on the hotel nightstand that said, I cannot be with someone who has nothing to offer. Goodbye. Michael tried calling her for 3 days. Every call went straight to voicemail. On the 4th day, the number was disconnected. Rachel Bennett had vanished from his life as quickly as she had entered it. His business followed. The last remaining clients, the ones who had stayed out of loyalty or inertia, finally left. They had read about the court case. Everyone had. The story of the man who divorced his pregnant wife at her father's funeral had spread through social media like wildfire. No one wanted to be associated with Michael Bradford. He lost his office because he could not pay the rent. He sold his car to cover his most pressing debts. He moved out of the hotel and into a cramped studio apartment in a rough neighborhood on the far side of the city. The apartment had thin walls, a broken heater, and a persistent smell of old cooking oil that no amount of cleaning could remove. Michael spent his days applying for jobs and his nights lying awake in the dark, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. No one would hire him. His reputation was destroyed. The moment any potential employer searched his name online, they found the articles, the headlines, the court transcripts, the story of what he had done. He was radioactive. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment was dark and the neighbor's television was bleeding through the thin walls, Michael would take out his phone and scroll through old photographs. There was one from his wedding day, Sarah smiling at him with so much love in her eyes that it almost hurt to look at. There was another from the day she told him she was pregnant, her face glowing with happiness, holding up the positive test, tears of joy on her cheeks. He had held all of that in his hands, all that love, all that devotion, all that goodness. And he had crushed it deliberately. One afternoon, Michael was walking through downtown, heading to yet another job interview that he knew would lead nowhere, when he looked up and saw a billboard. It was enormous, stretching across the entire side of a building. The photograph showed Sarah holding baby James. They were both smiling. Sarah looked stunning, confident and radiant and completely at peace. The baby was reaching up to touch her face, and she was laughing. The text on the billboard read, "The James Parker Foundation, helping families build better futures." Michael stood on the sidewalk and stared up at that billboard for a very long time. People walked around him. Cars honked. The city moved on. But Michael just stood there, looking up at the woman he had thrown away and the child he had abandoned, and felt tears running down his face. He could not escape her. She was everywhere now, on billboards and magazines, on television news programs discussing her charity work and her investment strategies and her vision for helping struggling families. Every article was a reminder of what he had lost. Sarah Parker invests $50 million in groundbreaking new technology startup. Parker Foundation opens 10th Family Center across the country. Sarah Parker named Philanthropist of the Year. Each headline was a knife. Each photograph was salt in an open wound. Michael began to understand something that he had never understood before. Something that his arrogance and selfishness had blinded him to for years. Sarah had never been boring. She had been kind. She had never been weak. She had been patient. She had never been worthless. She had been the most valuable thing in his life, and he had been too stupid and too cruel to see it. And now it was too late. The divorce was final. The custody papers were signed. The restraining order was in effect. There was no door left to knock on, no bridge left to cross, no second chance left to beg for. Michael Bradford had gotten exactly what he deserved. Nothing. It was a warm summer evening, almost a year after little James was born. The estate was bathed in golden light as the sun sank toward the horizon, turning the pond into a mirror of orange and pink. Sarah sat on the porch in a rocking chair, watching her son toddle across the lawn. James was walking now, unsteady but determined, his chubby legs carrying him from one adventure to the next. He was chasing a butterfly, his arms outstretched, laughing that pure belly laugh that only toddlers can produce. Lisa sat beside Sarah, sipping iced tea. "He looks just like your father," Lisa said softly. Sarah smiled. "I know. Sometimes, when the light hits his face a certain way, I see Daddy so clearly that it takes my breath away." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching James stumble and fall onto the soft grass, then pick himself right back up and keep going. Your dad would be so proud of you, Lisa said. Not just the foundation, not just the money, the way you handled everything, the way you kept your dignity when you had every right to lose it. Sarah rocked slowly in her chair. You know what I think about sometimes, she said. I think about that day at the cemetery. I think about standing behind that oak tree, holding those divorce papers, feeling like the ground had opened up beneath me. I was so convinced that my life was over. I thought I had lost everything. I thought I was completely alone in the world. Lisa reached over and squeezed her hand. But I was wrong, Sarah continued. I was not alone. Daddy was still with me. He had been preparing for that moment for years, building a safety net I did not even know existed. And the baby, she looked out at James, who was now sitting in the grass examining a dandelion with intense concentration. The baby was with me the whole time, kicking, moving, reminding me that I had something to live for. Sarah paused, watching a bird land on the edge of the pond. I used to think Michael broke me, she said quietly, but he did not. He removed himself from my life, and that turned out to be the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. Not the money, not the house, not any of that. The gift was freedom. Freedom to become who I was supposed to be without someone constantly telling me I was not enough. Lisa wiped a tear from her cheek. When did you get so wise? Sarah laughed. Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. They both laughed. And the sound carried across the lawn to where James was sitting. The little boy looked up at the sound of his mother's laughter and grinned, revealing 4 tiny teeth. Then he pulled himself to his feet and toddled toward her as fast as his little legs could carry him. Mama, James called out. Mama, Mama, Mama. Sarah stood up and caught him just as he reached the porch steps. She scooped him into her arms and held him close, burying her face in his soft hair that smelled like baby shampoo and grass and sunshine. Hello, my sweet boy, she whispered. Did you have fun chasing butterflies? Butterfly, James said seriously, pointing back toward the lawn. That is right, Sarah said. Butterfly. You are so smart, James, just like your grandfather. She carried him inside as the last rays of sunlight painted the estate in gold. The house was warm and full of life. Photographs lined the hallway. There was one of Sarah's father holding a baby James for the first time, a photograph that did not exist, of course, but instead there was a beautiful framed portrait of James Parker himself, young and smiling, standing in front of an early computer, back when Technova Solutions was just a dream in a college dorm room. Sarah stopped in front of the portrait, as she did every evening. Say goodnight to Grandpa, she told little James. Nye, James said, waving a chubby hand at the photograph. Sarah smiled and carried him upstairs to the nursery. She changed him into his pajamas, the ones with little stars on them. She sat in the rocking chair by the window and opened a picture book. Once upon a time, Sarah read softly, there was a little bear who went on a big adventure. James nestled against her chest, his eyes growing heavy. By the time Sarah reached the end of the story, he was asleep. She closed the book gently and sat there for a moment, rocking slowly, feeling her son's heartbeat against her own. I want you to know something, she whispered to her sleeping child. Your grandfather loved you before you ever took your first breath. He spent his whole life making sure you would be safe and taken care of. Everything I have, everything we have, exists because of his love. She kissed his forehead. And your father, she continued, even more quietly. Your father made choices that I cannot explain to you right now. Maybe someday, when you are older, we will talk about it. But here's what I need you to understand, James. Your worth is not determined by who stays and who leaves. Your value is not measured by someone else's inability to see it. You are precious. You are loved. You are enough. You have always been enough. She placed James gently in his crib and pulled the soft blanket up to his chin. The mobile of stars and moons turned slowly above him, casting tiny shadows on the ceiling. Sarah stood in the doorway and watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling, his tiny fists curled beside his face. Perfect, peaceful, safe. This was her life now, not a fairy tale, not a story with a prince who came to rescue her. This was something better, something real, a story about a woman who rescued herself, whose father's love became her shield, who found strength she never knew she possessed, who built something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. Sarah turned off the nursery light and walked down the hallway to her own bedroom. She paused at the window and looked out at the estate grounds, silvered now by moonlight. The pond glittered. The oak trees stood tall and ancient, their branches reaching toward the stars. Somewhere out there, in a cramped apartment on the wrong side of the city, Michael Bradford was lying awake, haunted by the life he had destroyed. But Sarah did not think about Michael. She had not thought about him in a very long time. He had become exactly what her therapist once described, a chapter in a book she had finished reading. She did not need to go back and reread it. She knew how it ended, and she had moved on to better chapters. Sarah climbed into bed and pulled the covers up. She reached over to the nightstand and picked up a small frame photograph that she kept there. It showed her father, James Parker, sitting in his favorite armchair, reading a newspaper, completely unaware that someone was taking his picture. It was the most ordinary photograph in the world, and it was Sarah's most treasured possession. "Thank you, Daddy," Sarah whispered to the photograph. "Thank you for everything. I hope I am making you proud." She placed the photograph back on the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and closed her eyes. Outside, the wind moved gently through the estate's ancient trees, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird sang. Sarah Parker slept peacefully. Her son slept peacefully beside her in the next room. They were safe. They were loved. They were free. And that, friends, is the end of our story. Remember this: your worth is not determined by who stays or who leaves. Your value is not measured by someone else's inability to see it. Sometimes the people who walk away from you are actually walking away from their own blessings. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift, because it gives you the freedom to rise without anyone watching. And sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is becoming so successful, so happy, so completely at peace, that the person who hurt you becomes nothing more than a distant memory. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Sarah's situation? We would love to hear from you. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, you are stronger than you think. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories and real-life lessons to our audience. Thank you for being part of this community.